I'm Rosemary Pace, Director of Pax Christi Metro New York, and this is our annual UN Peace Day observance. On your chairs is this nuclear prayer, which I'd like us to begin with. It's a prayer that is pretty interfaith. It was written by this Right Reverend William Swing. The beginning and the end are in your hands, O Creator of the universe, and in our hands you have placed the fate of this planet. We, who are tested by having both creative and destructive power in our free will, turn to you in sober fear and intoxicating hope. We ask for your guidance and to share in your imagination in our deliberations about the use of nuclear force. Help us to lift the fog of atomic darkness that hovers so pervasively over our earth, your earth, so that soon all eyes may see life magnified by your pure light. Bless all of us who wait today for your presence and who dedicate ourselves to achieve your intended peace and rightful equilibrium on earth. In the name of all that is holy and all that is hoped. Amen. I am going to introduce our speaker today, Alice Slater. Besides what I have written in front of me, I'm going to add that I met Alice, I guess, through Abolition 2000. And I remember when I first used to tell people Abolition 2000, they thought it was about abolishing the death penalty, which is certainly something Pax Christi is also supportive of. And now the Catholic Church has come out specifically with Pope Francis saying capital punishment is not consistent with our faith. But Abolition 2000 has always been for the abolition of nuclear weapons. And I guess it has to be maybe a couple of decades ago that I first met Alice. So she has been doing this work to abolish nuclear weapons for a long time. And unfortunately, we didn't make the initial goal. Abolition 2000, I'm quite sure, was called Abolition 2000 because the idea was to get rid of nuclear weapons by 2000. And here we are in 2018, and we're still fighting that battle. But we're closer, I hope. We have the treaty at the UN that was signed last July that now needs ratification from 50 countries. I didn't check recently. Do you know how many countries have signed right now?
15.
15, okay. And I know around Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
60 have signed.
Signed, we're fine, but they have to also ratify.
Right.
And I know when we were recognizing the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the week before it seemed like almost every day there was another ratification, or at least a signature. So it's out there. Unfortunately, the United States and all the nuclear weapons states have not been supportive of the treaty. So we have our work cut out for us to change our own government. But meantime, it's happening in other countries. So what I have here about Alice, she actually literally had to tell me on the flyer to kind of cut back on all her affiliations because there were so many. But it says, Alice serves on the Coordinating Committee of World Beyond War and is the UN NGO representative of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. She is on the Global Council of Abolition 2000 and on the Advisory Board of Nuclear Ban US to support the work of International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons in the United States, which, as I just said, won the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize for its help in, well, I didn't mention that, but it has to do with the treaty, which won the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize for its help in achieving successful UN negotiations for a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. She is a member of the New York City Bar Association and serves on the Coordinating Committee of the People's Climate Committee, New York, working for 100% green energy by 2030. Ms. Slater, yeah, we all wish it would have happened 5 years ago, but 2030. Ms. Slater serves on the board of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space and is an advisor to the Rideau Institute. She has written numerous articles and op-eds with frequent appearances on local and national media. So I give you Alice Slater.
Well, it's wonderful to be here and in what I think is a very important moment in my work for nuclear abolition. Because I thought in 1995, when Rosemary was telling us we had the Non-Proliferation Treaty that was signed in 1970, And it said in 25 years later, we're going to come back and see how we're doing. And the deal they made, 5 nuclear weapon states, the US, Russia, England, France, and China, promised to give up their nuclear weapons if all the rest of the world promised not to get them. And everybody signed that treaty except 3 countries, India, Pakistan, and Israel. And they went and got theirs. The treaty had this Faustian bargain where it promised if you signed the treaty and promised not to get nuclear weapons, we'll give you the keys to the bomb factory. We'll give you peaceful nuclear power. This was the bargain. So North Korea, for example, got their peaceful nuclear power, walked out and made a bomb. Iran, we thought, was on the way to that, when we made this deal that they wouldn't enrich their uranium. But the hardest part of getting a nuclear weapon is having the enriched uranium to make the bomb. And that comes from every peaceful nuclear power reactor. You just put it through a few more times and you're in bomb territory. So we were there in 1995. We came, and NGOs came from all over the world. And I want to tell you these personal stories. I had never been to the UN. I showed up because we're going to, eliminate nuclear weapons, and we're going to make sure that they make good on their promise in the NPT. They said they're going to get rid of them, and now they had twice as many as when they first signed. What's going on here? And there was somebody from the Union of Concerned Scientists, Jonathan Dean, who was a former U.S. ambassador, that really knew his way around. And he said to us, we NGOs, that's what they call us, that's our title, non-governmental organization. That's a title, you're not an organization, NGOs. So anyway, he said, we ought to have our own statement. We said, oh, that's good. He said, I've drafted one, and he hands it out. It's nuclear weapons forever, U.S. über alles. We're reading this statement. We said, oh my God. So we said, no, we're going to do our own statement. And we wrote the Abolition 2000 statement. We called for a treaty to eliminate nuclear weapons by the year 2000, this was 95, and for a complete phase out of nuclear power because it's inextricably linked. And then, of course, when we weren't getting our way, we made a note that we actually produced a model nuclear weapons treaty. We had lawyers and policymakers and scientists. It became an official UN document. It went all around the world, how you would actually dismantle the bomb. And the one thing I'm proud of is that we established the International Renewable Energy Agency, because there was the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. There was the International Energy Agency that was established in the 70s after the oil crisis to make sure fossil fuel got, but there was nothing for sun, wind, all the fabulous, free, abundant energy that we could use to get off all these miserable, and we have to think about this. We can't just think about nuclear weapons, because the existential threat to our planet is nuclear weapons and climate insanity, so we have to really try to work with both. And that was one thing I liked about Abolition 2000, and we got the energy established. There was this German parliamentarian that was so powerful, and Germany got rid of all their nuclear power plants. They just did it. They're the only one that said we're getting rid of it, There are about 30 countries that have it. And right now, it's really serious because the capitalism run amok wants to sell nuclear power to countries that never had it before. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Vietnam, Turkey, all these bad actors that are now going to have their own bomb factories, I was at a meeting in Japan. I met with Tadzio Akiba, he was a parliamentarian from Hiroshima and later became head of the mayors of peace that were working for a nuclear-free world. They were putting out all these statements, organizing mayors all around the world. I met with him when he was a parliamentarian. One of my friends in Japan took me up to meet him, and he said, well, Japan has the bomb. I said, what are you talking about? He said, we have all the material, we have the technology. I said, how long would it, because they're enriching uranium. Like, we told Iran not to enrich uranium, but we didn't tell Japan not to enrich. We have like this, two-faced, hypocritical policies. I said, how long would it take? He said, 3 months. I was in a state of shock. And every now and then, you see Japanese generals, if there's too much peace breaking out, saying maybe we should, weaponize our stockpiles. So, like, they have their bomb in the basement. Anyway, where was I? So here we are. We draft our abolition. We got the treaty. Nothing happened. There were more and more weapons. The Cold War ended. We thought, oh, wow, this is over. Gorbachev let go of all of Eastern Europe without a shot. It was like a miracle that happened, and the wall came down. And then we found out, I want to go back earlier. I've done a study on this. Woodrow Wilson in 1970, I'm going to talk about us in Russia because we're the big gorillas on the block. There are 16,000 nukes on the planet, and 15,000 of them are in the US and Russia. All the other 7 have 1,000 between them, Israel and Pakistan and India and France, China, England, and North Korea. But us in Russia, we're the ones that have to really make this happen if we're going to have nuclear disarmament. So what are our prospects for working well with Russia? Well, I just looked at this. In 1917, Woodrow Wilson sent 30,000 American soldiers to help the White Russians against the peasants. What the hell were we doing in Russia in It was this capitalism, we didn't want. There was no Stalin yet. There was nothing. They were just overthrowing the Tsar, Anyway, then Gorbachev lets go of everything. Oh, Stalin said to Truman, they were our ally in World War II. Russia and America defeated Nazi Germany. We were allies. So we dropped the bomb, and Stalin said to Truman, turn the bomb over to the UN, because we were working with the Soviet Union to establish the United Nations, to end the scourge of war. That was like the preamble of the United Nations. Truman said no. So of course Russia got their bomb. They weren't going to be left out of the race. Then when the wall came down and Gorbachev let go of all of Eastern Europe, and Reagan met with him, and they agreed, let's get rid of all our nuclear weapons. What do we need them for? But Gorbachev says, yeah, but you can't do Star Wars. And we had this Vision 2020 document from the U.S. Space Command that said the U.S. mission, dominating and controlling the military use of space to protect U.S. interests and investments. Shameless. We had that going on then. So anyway, Reagan said to Gorbachev, I can't give up Star Wars. And Gorbachev pulled the deal off the table. Putin said to Clinton, let's cut our arsenals to 1,000 each and call everybody to the table to negotiate a nuclear disarmament treaty. But don't put missiles in Eastern Europe. We were already starting to build the emplacements in Romania. Clinton said, I'm not going to promise that. So Putin pulled out of that deal, and Bush walked out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty. We negotiated that with the Soviets in 1972, where we promised the U.S. and Soviet Union we weren't going to build anti-ballistic missiles, because then we would have to build more missiles. So that allowed us to stop the missile race. Bush walked out, put the missiles in Romania. They're scheduled to go into Poland. The other thing, Gorbachev was very concerned when he spoke to Reagan about Germany, because they lost 29 million people in Russia to the Nazi onslaught. Think of that. I'm Jewish. We talk about our 6 million people all the time. Did anybody ever hear this 29 million Russians died to the German onslaught? So Gorbachev said, if I'm letting the wall fall and everybody's going free, I don't want a united Germany in NATO, because we still had NATO. They let go of their Eastern Alliance. We said, don't worry, let them come into NATO, and we promise we will not expand NATO 1 inch to the east. And this was in a New York Times op-ed by Jack Matlock. That was Reagan's Secretary of State. He was in those negotiations, and now NATO is right up to their border, and we're doing military maneuvers. I mean, how would the United States think if they did maneuvers in Canada or Mexico? I mean, we know what happens when they went to Cuba. We almost had World War III when they put their missiles into Cuba. And when they got them out, Kennedy made a deal with Khrushchev that was not public because the Congress wouldn't let him. But he promised a year later to remove our missiles that were in Turkey. And we did. We took our missiles out of Turkey a year after they got out of Cuba. Guess what? They're back there. We have missiles in Turkey. We have nuclear weapons in 5 NATO countries. Turkey, Germany, Belgium, Holland, and Italy have U.S. nuclear weapons there. So the last 10 years we had a campaign to make nuclear weapons illegal, because the Non-Proliferation Treaty just says we're going to make good faith efforts to get rid of them. It doesn't say they're outlawed. It doesn't say they're illegal. And we've said chemical weapons are illegal and biological weapons, but we never said that for nuclear. So there was this huge international campaign. The biggest helpers were the International Red Cross that did this whole. They changed the way we thought about nuclear weapons from this strategic deterrence, military talk, to the humanitarian consequences of nuclear war, and they reminded everybody how inhumane any use of a nuclear weapon would be. And Pope Francis, he was fabulous. He gave up the church's position on deterrence. The Catholic Church used to support us, saying it's okay to have nuclear weapons in the very case where your survival is at stake, that you can use them to deter the other side from using them against you. That was okay. And then this bantry said, no, they're illegal, they're unlawful all the time, and Pope Francis supported it, made a statement to the negotiations at the UN, and also in Austria the year before we got to the UN, he put in a Vatican statement. It was very helpful to us. Anyway, so we get the treaty, we win the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, this is like so extraordinary. So I'm home. My daughter lives in California, she's staying with me, and the phone rings 5:30 in the morning, and my friend from Australia, Tilman Ruff, who was the chairman of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN. We were in like 400 countries we were in like 80 countries with 400 organizations that were all negotiating. We got 122 countries at the UN to vote for it. So I get this phone call, 5:30 in the morning. Alice, we won the Nobel Peace Prize, and I'm screaming. My daughter comes in, she said, Mom, who's calling so early, and why are you screaming? I said, I won the Nobel Peace Prize. So now she's screaming, and the two of us are dancing and hugging, and she said, I have to go to Oslo. I said, no, I'm going to be 80, it's cold, it's dark, I'll go with you. So my daughter went with me to Oslo, and we were there with the king and the queen and the trumpets, and the prize was accepted by the executive director of ICAN, this young woman in her mid-30s, Beatrice Finn from Sweden, who had had a baby while this was all going on, during the campaign, and an 82-year-old survivor of Hiroshima, Setsuko Thurlow, who was like 14, wound up emigrating to Canada, married a Canadian, was very articulate in English. She was a sociologist, and she spoke at so many of our UN meetings on behalf of the survivors, Habakasha they call them. So she and Beatrice accepted the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the campaign. It was very exciting. And now what? So the US and the other nuclear states are saying, we'll never sign, this is undercutting the NPT. But the treaty actually makes a way for them to join. And what we're doing in the nuclear weapon states and in the nuclear umbrella, we call it the umbrella. NATO is all under our nuclear umbrella. There's a NATO policy that we will use our nuclear weapons on their behalf. Japan, Australia, and South Korea are part of the U.S. nuclear umbrella in Asia. So now what we're doing is getting the umbrella states to be part of this divestment campaign, Don't Bank on the Bomb. That's run by Pax Christi out of the Netherlands. And it gives you all the information for every country, who's investing in weapons, which pensions, which banks, and people are going. Like the country in Norway said, we're not going to have any of our government pensions invested in companies that manufacture or produce materials for nuclear weapons. So there's been some successes here in America. I think the city in Maryland, what's that? I have it. Tacoma Park, they have a resolution that they're not going to invest in nuclear weapons manufacturing. And here in New York City, we had this little group of us, New Yorkers, that were all part of this ban treaty stuff. We got a letter from the head of the finance company to the comptroller of the New York, Scott Stringer. He's the New York City comptroller. And we got 27 council members to sign. That's more than half of them, to sign this letter to Stringer saying we want all the New York City pensions divested from nuclear weapons and we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what Stringer's going to do. At some point, so far it's just a small group of people doing this, and we just made phone calls and everybody signed on. Like my councilman, Ben Kalos, I called his office and they said he's on paternity leave. He had his first child. So I wrote him a long letter, how wonderful for your first child that you will be against nuclear weapons and provide her with a safe, so he signed on. But they all signed on. It was like, I think we're in the zeitgeist, like people really want to get rid of the bomb, and we're going to overcome them. The other thing I want to talk about, did I finish my Russia? Oh, I want to tell you that now things are really heating up with Russia because Trump got elected saying, I want to make a deal with Russia. I want to make a deal with North Korea. I want to get rid of NATO, right? Well, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? And the Democrats moved to the right of the Republicans on this. I mean, there's just nobody that wants the deal. First of all, South Korea's new president is like if we had elected Dennis Kucinich or Jeremy Corbyn. They got a real radical, progressive president in South Korea that wants to make peace. We still have 38,000 troops on their border since 1953. This is insane. So crazy Trump goes and makes his deal, and then they actually passed a vote with a lot of Democrats voting for it that we cannot take troops out of North Korea because he was promising them that. I don't know where it's going to go. And then the Russian thing. I mean, Al Gore won the election, and they blame Ralph Nader, who's like an American saint. I mean, he gave us clean air and clean water and seatbelt. Everybody said Nader lost the election. I mean, the Supreme Court lost it. Hillary won this election, and they're blaming Putin, the Democrat. I mean, why aren't they fixing the Electoral College? And why aren't we getting paper ballots? Well, you have to be high IQ to figure out if you have paper ballots. We don't have to worry about computers. I mean, what's the cost of the paper, compared to all this fancy computer voting where they're stealing all the votes and we don't know what's going on with the computers. So anyway, now there's a move to get smaller, more usable nuclear weapons. What does that mean? Are you reading about this? Smaller nuclear weapons? The Congress is voting on this now. And there's a bill in from some of the, I don't call them good guys, the arms controllers say, no, we shouldn't have smaller, more usable nuclear weapons. But they're not saying get rid of them or sign the ban treaty or, the U.S. This ban treaty shows how nuclear power nuclear armed states can join the ban treaty. It has a whole bunch of provisions. You say you want to join, and then they have inspections, and then you reveal your inventory. In other words, they set up a process where we could do it. It's not, it's not rocket science. It's counting, it's numbers, and looking at things. I have this thought that we should have civics for every high school student in America. And part of their senior year, they come and count all the ballots at every election and register to vote. So they'll learn arithmetic, they'll register to vote, and we'll be trusting them. We won't think they're stealing the ballots. Anyway, things heated up when, as soon as he met with Putin, there was like all this negative stuff. And Putin gave a State of the Nation address in March, and I want to read what he said. Back in 2000, he said, the U.S. announced its withdrawal from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Russia was categorically against this. We saw the Soviet-U.S. ABM Treaty signed in 1972 as the cornerstone of the international security system. Together with the Strategic Arms Reduction START, the ABM Treaty not only created an atmosphere of trust, but also prevented either party from recklessly using nuclear weapons, which would have endangered humankind. We did our best to dissuade the Americans from withdrawing from the treaty, all in vain. The U.S. pulled out of the treaty in 2002. Even after that, we tried to develop constructive dialogue with the Americans. We proposed working together in this area to ease concerns and maintain the atmosphere of trust. At one point, I thought a compromise was possible, but this was not to be. All our proposals, absolutely all of them, were rejected. And then we said that we would have to improve our modern strike systems to protect our security. And they did. And now we're doing more against them. But it's always been us, provoking them. It has. We were the first, we got the bomb, we dropped the bomb, we didn't want to turn it off. And there was another thing that's really interesting. After we did that Stuxnet attack, remember we attacked Iran's enrichment facility with computers with Israel? It was like a big deal. Putin called Obama. This was Obama. This was in 2009. And here's the New York Times story. U.S. and Russia differ on a treaty for cyberspace. He called him up and said, look, let's do a deal. Let's do a treaty on no cyber war. And we turned him down. I mean, there's like some arrogance that we think we're going to stay ahead of the arms race and we're going to be better than them and they're not going to hurt us. It's like they're putting us all in danger. I mean, we really have to stop. I think I said everything that you might not know about. I'm open to any questions or comments or arguments. Anybody have any thoughts? We're
going to talk about World Beyond War.
Oh, right, the other groups. World Beyond War, I'm on the coordinating committee. I love it because it's saying we can make the end of war on the planet an idea whose time has come. I mean, war is just so 20th century. We haven't won a war since World War II. We're in like 20 wars right now, I mean, the drone thing, Obama, they had the article on the front page of Times that he met every Tuesday with the head of the CIA and the NSA and one other, and they picked targets. And some kid in Colorado sitting at his joystick was shooting people on the ground, no judge, no jury, no evidence, no trial, just they said who to kill. And it wound up, we killed about 1,000 innocent civilians. That's the lowest count I've seen. And, this is all 911. It's being cooked up fear. I lived through the Red Scare. And now we got the terrorist scare. And we're really running out of terrorists. That's why now it's the Russian scare again. Russia's doing it. It's always somebody doing it to us, but it's always because we have to keep the military-industrial. That's what Eisenhower warned about. The military-industrial complex, keeping that going. I went to a fabulous meeting. World Beyond War was part of this with Code Pink yesterday. They're forming a coalition, not just for the nuclear divestment that I've been doing in the city council. As soon as we need people, we'll let you know. You know, if Stringer does it, then we don't have to do it. But if he says no, we're going to have to get a resolution and grassroots pressure. So far, it's been, I can't believe how successful it's been without any pressure at all, you know, just phone calls to council people. But they are doing a military divestment for everything, not just nukes. And they're doing it, they're going to picket the president of BlackRock, who's at some big dinner where the International Red Cross is honoring him. He's military contract. The U.S. International Red Cross did not support what we were doing with the ban treaty. It was the International Red Cross. I mean, because the U.S. Red Cross is too locked in with U.S. policy and U.S. power, you know. So, World Beyond War, we have, I can send this around. I ask you all to just join. And I think they're doing great work. But just the idea of talking to people like it's time to end war. You know, we're all talking about nukes and Yemen. I mean, we have to do Yemen and nukes. But we have to also start a new conversation in the world to end war. I was in a group called the Hunger Project. How many people heard of the Hunger Project? It was like in 1976. And the whole point was to make the end of hunger on the planet an idea whose time has come. And at that time, everybody thought starvation's inevitable, there's too many people, you'll always have, and you know, we just kept putting out the facts. There is enough food, you know, people will limit their population as families get fed. They use birth control, you know, these poor families have so many children because they die and they need people, you know. Anyway, there were all these facts we kept putting out, and eventually it got into the millennium. It's not that we ended it yet, but now it's in the Millennium Development Goals to end hunger on the planet by a certain year, you know. So that's what I think World Beyond War is going to do. We'll start putting out the myths that they're not inevitable. You don't have to have war. There are other ways and better ways. We do webinars. We have a divestment group. We have a group that works to get the military out of U.S. schools. So I really encourage you to join, because I think it's numbers. Like, we should be able to say like 30 million people want to end war on the planet, you know. So sign up and you'll see our stuff and maybe get engaged. And then there's also Nuclear Ban U.S. That's the one, Tacoma Park and Ojai, that they got cities to vote. And California just recently, this is so interesting, they passed 2 resolutions, this California legislature. One complimented the ban treaty and called for people to start, you know, take the weapons off high alert. I don't know if I said that, but Russia and we have 15,000, but about 2,000 in each country are on hair trigger alert, pointed at each other, ready to go. You know, so there's a bill now that only the Congress can push the button because of Trump. You know, but that's not a sensible bill that only the Congress can push the button. The thing is, get rid of them, right? I mean, that's the best we can get out of our current Congress. That they take them off the hair trigger alert, which is good, you know, de-alert them. Nobody can use a nuclear weapon unless they come to the Congress first to vote on it, you know. But I can't get engaged. And they also have a bill to stop the smaller nuke that they're doing. Now, what's a smaller nuke? It's as big as Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because these guys went on to make that the trigger for the hydrogen bomb, which is magnitudes larger. So doing a smaller nuke is not a favor to anybody. You can wipe out a whole city with it. You know, why should we be doing that now? Well, we're doing it because Russia's saying they're going to do stuff. And they're doing it because we pulled out of the ABM treaty and wouldn't negotiate a space ban. China and Russia in 2008 and 2015 tabled a model treaty in the Commission on Disarmament to keep weapons out of space. We have a treaty that keeps weapons of mass destruction out of space, but not other weapons. And you need consensus in this body, in the Disarmament Committee in Geneva. Everybody has to agree before you can talk about it, and we vote no. We veto it. We won't even discuss it with China and Russia. So, I mean, as Americans, we have a lot to do. It's so hard to believe. And then I think I want to, because I'm really concerned about Russia, I think we really all have to look at this. The first of all, when I went to Queens College in 1953, I was having a discussion with somebody in the cafeteria. She said, "Here, you should read this." And she gives me a pamphlet. It says Communist Party of America. And my heart is pounding. I'm like terrified. I put it in my book bag. I go home. I take the elevator up to the 8th floor. I go right to the incinerator. I throw it down without looking at it. That was how terrified we were of communists, right? Then I finally go to the Soviet Union. I joined the Lawyers Alliance, Nuclear Arms Control, and Soviets had stopped their nuclear testing in Kazakhstan because this Kazakh poet, Olza Suleymanov, led a huge march that people were getting cancer and birth defects, and everything. And the Soviet Union, Gorbachev was president, stopped nuclear testing. So we went to Congress and said, listen, the Soviets stopped. We were blowing stuff up in Nevada. It was underground because Kennedy wanted to stop all of it, but they only let him stop atmospheric testing. So it went underground. We did 1,000 nuclear tests underground, and they vented and leaked and gave people cancer and poisoned water in the native Shoshone holy ground that we're testing on. So anyway, Soviets stopped, so we go to Congress, our groups, and say, we have to stop that. Oh, you can't trust the Russians. So Bill DeWind, who was a partner in Paul Weiss Rifkin, and he's from the Dutch DeWinds that lived up the Hudson, and he was chairman of the New York City Bar Association, raised $6 million. And we go to the Soviet Union, and we speak to the Soviet lawyers and their government, and they let us put in a team of seismologists all over near their test site. And we came back to Congress and we said, you don't have to trust the Russians. We've got a seismograph there. If they cheat, we'll know. And that's how we were able to stop nuclear testing in America. Except you had Clinton, who gave the lab $6 billion when he signed the test ban treaty to do subcritical tests. They were still blowing up plutonium in Nevada, but it didn't have a chain reaction. So Clinton said it's not a test, like I didn't inhale, I didn't have sex, and I'm not testing. That was what. And now it's developed when Obama negotiated with Medvedev with this little start where they cut another 1,500 out of our 15,000 nuclear bombs. He promised $1 trillion over the next 30 years for 2 new bomb factories at Oak Ridge and Kansas, and submarines and missiles and bombs. And Trump did it and even raised it a little, but it's Obama's. So anyway, I want to tell you my experience after having that communist thing. So I'm now in the Soviet Union, and I'm seeing every guy over 60 is walking around with his World War II medals on his chest. Every street corner has a stone carving with all the dead on that block. The Leningrad Cemetery, now in St. Petersburg, had mass graves, huge mounds of just the year. 400,000 people died in the siege of Leningrad. I'm looking at this, and my guide, we had guides said to us, why don't you Americans trust us? I said, why don't we trust you? What about Hungary? What about Czechoslovakia? Why should we trust you? My arrogance American. And he looks at me with tears in his eyes, and he says, we had to protect our border from Germany. And I look at the guy, and that was their mentality. I didn't make it right what they were doing, but their mentality was they had been so badly assaulted that they were never going to let Germany get anywhere near them, and those countries are going to stay under their anyway. I just felt like I hadn't had all the facts, and I hope today I gave you some of the facts that we have to really get our government to tell the truth about things. We can't blame it on Russia. We can't blame it on Russia. It's like Pogo. Remember that line in Pogo? We met the enemy and he is us. It's us. We have the power. I mean, that it gives you power to know that we could actually change everything. So, is that it? Did I take up enough time? Yeah. Are you all? Yeah, go ahead.
For the general lack of awareness and concern among the American public about nuclear weapons, they're not concerned. And it's actually getting scarier with the new weaponization. The time will be even less until we got to a warning whether the nuclear attack is real or fake or something like that. Do you have any thoughts on why there is this general lack of?
They don't want it. They don't want us to know. I mean, they own the media. You know, they control the news. You watch the media, it's so depressing. You know, you get hurricane reports all the time, but nothing about, you know, how much coal did we pour into the environment, or, you know, gasoline that's causing, and how it's, they're just not, they don't want us to know. I mean, what's helping us while we got the ban treaty is that we have the internet now. Like, there's more. I'm optimistic. I mean, I thought, like, when these kids marched against the shootings in New York, we had 100,000 people on the street of New York marching against the NRA, and they were all young. I mean, there were very few older people, and they were registering people to vote on the march. And then we have Alexandria, and even, you know, Cynthia didn't do that well, but she did well. You know, she got out there. And just think, I was watching commercial television because I got rid of my cable. I was so mad at all of them, but I was watching every half hour. Cuomo had this slick commercial, and there was nothing from, we used to have a fairness doctrine, remember? Does anybody remember that? We used to have, Reagan got rid of it. Reagan got rid of the fairness doctrine where they couldn't dominate the airwaves. So we're just not getting the news we need. I think that's the reason. And I don't know, the answer is to keep joining some of these social networks and spreading the word among people that way.
I'm trying to think about the subcritical testing that you mentioned. What they did there was really horrible because they weren't doing nuclear tests anymore, they were doing computer tests. And they were saying that was nuclear. But that's what allowed India, that gave India the justification to stay out of the agreement. And that's what destroyed the ability to have that treaty signed, was Clinton's decision to do the subcritical testing, cyber testing, subcritical testing, whatever you want to call it. It was all done on a computer. And India's rationalization was, well, that will allow the advanced countries like the United States and Russia and China and the United Kingdom to continue doing nuclear tests on computers. Since we can't do those tests on computers to do it on that technology, they're going to be able to continue to develop these weapons, and we can't. And that was the thing that killed the treaty from being signed. That treaty was this close to being signed until Clinton did that.
Well, Clinton signed it, but the Congress never ratified it. But I was there when India was arguing.
He signed it, but by allowing the subcritical testing, he prevented India. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was in the UN when the Indian ambassador was saying, if you don't change this and preclude the laboratory tests and the subcriticals, we're not going to sign.
Yeah.
And this was in the Committee on Disarmament where you need a consensus. And for the first time in the history, they just said, the hell with it. We're bringing it to the UN. They opened it up for signature over India's objection. Like, we've been vetoing the space treaty, but they didn't let India. And now they're trying to do that with Pakistan on the cutoff for missile. They have this stupid thing they're asking for. They want to cut off the production of fissile material for weapons purposes, but not for nuclear power purposes. So, and Pakistan says, if you don't do the whole thing, we're not going to be part of it. But this is a personal story. We were thanking the ambassador from Australia, this son of a gun, Richard Butler, from the old white colonial patriarchy. We had this party at the UN NGO, and everybody's having a few drinks, and I'm there with him, and I said to him, what are you going to do about India? He says, I was just in Washington meeting with Sandy Berger. That's Clinton's security guy, "We're gonna screw in here." He said twice, "We're gonna screw in here." So I looked at him, I said, "How can you talk? Oh, you can't." And he kisses me on one cheek, he kisses me on the other cheek, and I walk away. And I'm thinking, if I was a man, he couldn't have done that, right? He shut me up. That was his answer, I swear. I'm giving you my eyewitness to history. That was Australia. It's the old colonial network that's still doing this. The patriarchs.
Isn't a lot of it money too, though? I mean, isn't everything in the United States about money?
Well, they're driving it, the manufacturers. That's why I think this code, you should look up the code pink divestment site. You know, don't bank on the bomb. There are other things you can do besides the city council. You can go to your bank and tell them, like Amalgamated Bank in New York City has already said they're not going to have any depositors there that make nuclear weapons, you know, that are involved in nuclear production. So don'tbankonthebomb.org is a very good website to check out what you can do personally. Wait, I put it, I have it here. Divestfromwarmachine.org, that's the code pink group. Sign up there, and there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in New York. They're forming a coalition. I mean, maybe perhaps Christi will join that coalition. We had a first organizing meeting yesterday, and there's going to be another meeting. There's going to be a huge demo about this BlackRock guy. BlackRock is a big military contractor.
Didn't they just have one this week? I thought there was a demonstration.
I was in that.
Oh, how was it?
Well, it was a small turnout.
Yeah.
We got some stuff done. The time hook, if you will, is that the like International Rescue Society or something is giving, I think it's Mr. Bank or something, from BlackRock, a humanitarian award.
Oh, right. That's what this is. Like, it's so disgusting that they're giving him the humanitarian award for all the weapons he manufactured. So I don't know. We're going to figure out. So we'll try to get a good turnout there.
Good, yeah.
Do you know, Mary?
It's like the third week of October for 5 days, I think. Now they just changed the date.
Oh, okay. It's to help count the money that is being invested in nuclear weapons. And they're going to be counting in fake money, but $1 million bills up to the trillion plus that we've dedicated since Obama. So that's another one that we can't totally blame Trump for. But it's $1 trillion over the next 30 years to upgrade our nuclear weapons, to modernize our.
But definitely do this divest, don't bank on the bomb, and the new code pink thing. I think that's going to be very, it's not just nukes, it's everything, but I think we have to think of everything. And then I want to put in a plug for the OFF Act, off fossil fuels. There's legislation in the House, in the State Assembly and the State Senate to have New York be completely sustainable by 2035 off all nuclear and fossil fuel. And that would give us the money to do what we have to do and tell the military to go stuff it, you know? I mean, like, I think we have to be on two tracks with this. We definitely have to get rid of nukes and war, but we also have to make New York be New York. I mean, we're the Saudi Arabia of wind. And you know, out in Massachusetts, they were so upset they didn't want to see the windmills, so they were like fighting the wind. We don't have to look at the windmills. We have this shallow seabed off of Rockaway that goes all the way out over the horizon. We could put all the windmills over the horizon, and we never have to see them. So we could have enough wind for the whole eastern seaboard practically. There's no reason that we're not doing this except corporate greed. They're stopping it. They're blocking it. Cuomo wants to give $7.6 billion in subsidies to 3 upstate nuclear power plants. Well, we have to stop it. I mean, you could put a solar roof on every house in New York for that. You know, I mean. So anyway, there's plenty to do. I'm glad you're all here, and onwards and upwards. Do our best. Yes?
My neighbors and my family, they're not really interested in these topics at all. But sometimes they ask me, well, what did you do on Sunday? And I'll tell them, give them a few facts. And one of the things I'd like to be able to tell them is, have you ever, in your long life of trying to make some difference in terms of nuclear war and just the horror of the thought of it, have you ever been tempted to say, this is just to quit, to use the simple term? I'd like to be able to tell my family and my neighbors your answer to this.
I think I'm driven. I can't quit. It's like, first of all, I'm right, and I'm going to win, and I'm going to stop all the bad stuff, and that's like, well, my life, I'm living it. I got active. I was a suburban housewife in Massapequa with my 2 kids. And I'm watching television in 1968, and they show Ho Chi Minh going to Woodrow Wilson in 1919. This was like CBS reports when they showed you real news, begging us to help them get the French out of Vietnam. They treated them like slaves. I mean, they had rubber plantations instead of cotton, but they were enslaved by the French. He even modeled his constitution after ours. This is what the news story is showing, and we said no. And the Soviets were more than happy to help him. And the same night, the kids at Columbia were locking the president in his office. Remember, they were rioting in New York City. I mean, I was like terrified. I said, my God, this America, what's wrong with these kids? I had already turned 30, like they said, don't trust anyone over 30. So I said, I better do something, and I went, this is how I became an activist. I went down to the Democratic Club, and they were having a debate between the Hawks and the Doves, and I joined the Doves, and the next thing I know, I'm helping to organize Eugene McCarthy's campaign in Massapequa, and I just never stopped. I never stopped. I don't know why. I just think, like, then we really won. I mean, like, we took over the whole Democratic Party and nominated McGovern, that was going to end the war. We showed that we could do it politically. And then the media killed us. They never wrote one honest thing about McGovern. They talked about Eagleton, his vice president, had been hospitalized for manic depression, and that was the headline, like O.J. and Monica was like, oh, baloney. And he only won a couple, like Massachusetts and Washington. And these super delegates that they're getting rid of now, they put them in because of us, because we took over the whole party. Like, we showed democracy works. So I've had positive experiences. In the end, they've turned bad. But I think we're on a new wave, and I think Trump is an opportunity. Like, everything is so bad and so miserable that everybody's out in the streets now, the kids, the new elections. There was twice as many people voted in the primary this time as last time. I think democracy's on the rise, and that's what'll save us.